So my little part on this is fermented vegetables. Who doesn't like fermented vegetables? Come on, be honest. Anybody not like fermented? I know I've heard at least one, I don't eat sauerkraut. All right, I understand. However, probiotics is really big these days. That's the buzzword. And you can get all your probiotics in just 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut. So you got to think about it. Do you want to spend a bunch of money on a pill that you don't know for sure actually gets all the way down to the gut? Or do you want to use what nature gave us? So I do both, just so. So how do you know you're growing the right kind of bacteria in your sauerkraut or whatever it is that you're fermenting? And for whatever reason, when you put that salt in there and you do it in this way without having any air get to it, it creates what they call it's called the lactic acid bacteria. He's got a fancier name, but that's an easier way to say it. Lactic acid bacteria. And that lactic acid bacteria starts growing what they call colonies. And it grows colonies and grows colonies, and it changes the texture of the food, and it preserves the food. But not only does it preserve the food, but it also helps it preserve the enzymes and the vitamins that are with the food. So because you're not heating it, you're not losing vitamins. Because you're not cooking it, you're not leaching out vitamins. So you're preserving more of the nutrients that come from that particular food. You also, it also does things like it just helps with your digestibility, because the food is, because of it, the lacto acid bacteria, what it does is it's not affected by the high acids in your stomach. So the food is actually able to go all the way down into your gut where you need it, and then that's where it'll blossom and grow. Because I don't know if all of y'all know it sounds kind of gross, but we're filled with bacteria, viruses, and what was the other thing? Yeast. So the whole idea is to keep the good guys strong and keep the bad guys down. And you're going to have both all the time. But when you get ill, that's because the bad guys have won. All right? So these probiotics have been shown to eliminate diarrhea and constipation. So it works for both ends. I don't like know how that put it. It improves irritable bowel syndrome. It fights urinary infections and yeast infections. It boosts your immune function. It prevents illness and infection. And it even helps digest lactose in those that are lactose intolerant. So you could eat your ice cream and then go eat a couple of spoonfuls of sauerkraut and a tummy ache. Because that will go so well together, right? All right, so it is also one of the bacteria that's been the most studied. So when they study it, they have not been able to find anything that is bad. They don't, you know how you always have, you can't eat too much sauerkraut. But you'll know it because you'll be in the bathroom. Okay. So that's about all I have for mine. I've got one thing I did learn when I was researching is that you can ferment fruits as well. I don't see the fruit piece. I'm not real keen on even apple cider vinegar, but that would be it with the mother. That would be an example of a fruit that has been preserved with that bacteria in it. That's what the mother is that LAB, lactose acid bacteria, lactic acid. So what I've done today is I've brought regular old sauerkraut that I've seasoned with some chives and some dill. And then this is what they call a Latin America coleslaw. And it's got carrots in it as well, and some different, like oregano, some different varieties. And I inoculated this with some whey from my yogurt. So that's another way, if you're trying to avoid a lot of salt, that's another way for you to be able to create your fermented vegetables, is use the whey off of your dairy products. This is a cultured beet, so it's cooked beets, which takes some of the goodness out of it, but they're cooked beets, and then they're put in the salt solution to ferment. Green beans, fresh out of the garden. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, I ferment my own beet juice,
Oh,
and I just take like
This?
distilled water, distilled water, salt, and the beets in there, fresh beets, and it takes 4 or 5 days unless I put whey in it. If I put whey, it's faster, but you don't have to.
no, that's what this is.
Yeah, okay, and then I drink it.
And I had never tried it before. It's pretty salty, but you didn't put any salt in yours, or did you?
No, I put a tablespoon
Okay.
of salt to make like, you have to have like a gallon jar to make 2 quarts. So you have to have this,
Right.
no, not for that, that's for my kefir. The beets, no, I just use like, a candy jar,
Uh-huh.
a big one.
Right.
I don't know what it is.
Like this is a half gallon.
I think it's a half gallon, but mine's shorter and fatter. And I add a tablespoon of Himalayan salt, and then I put my purified water in, and I chop my beets up, put them in the bottom. And it's fun to watch.
Well, that's what this is. It does not look like it's ready yet, but I
No,
am
it's
starting to
not.
see some bubbling.
It'll be almost purple when it's ready.
Cool.
It's beautiful.
Yep.
And I add a little bit of like, when I drink it, sometimes I put orange oil in it, essential oil,
Mhm.
just to sweeten it up a little bit because it's pretty strong.
And then once you use it down, you can actually refill it. Use your beets a second time. It's not quite as strong. It's kind of like making another cup of tea with a tea bag. Yes, Donna?
Can you, I know this is she's come out and make it a little bit sweet. Can you add a little bit of sugar, like, after it's finished, if you're going to start to drink it?
After it's finished.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just put it in a glass.
I wouldn't even add it. I would add it when I'm pouring in my serving.
Right.
Yeah.
Go.
And remember, when you're finished with this, or when you think it's the tartness that you like, you put it in the refrigerator. It slows the process, but it does not stop the process. So it will continue to ferment in your refrigerator just at a much slower pace.
And it lasts a long time.
Yes, it will.
Is that how you store it?
I'm sorry?
Store it in your refrigerator?
Yes,
after
yes.
it's opened?
Once you get to the tartness that you want, then you want to go ahead and put it in the refrigerator. And that just keeps the other bacteria from growing, and like I said, slows the process.
Tell them about the lids on your jars.
Okay, yeah. And anyway, I've got handouts for everybody, and I've got the one sauerkraut is ready if anybody would like to try it. I know our intern group last year tried it, and some people were surprised. They thought, but all they'd ever had was pasteurized, heat processed sauerkraut, and it does taste different. So if anybody's brave, they can come up and try some of the sauerkraut. I also have all the recipes for these in the back on the handout. Okay? This is what I used to use, and it would go on, notice not even a wide mouth. It goes on a regular mouth, and you stick it in there, and then the air comes up, and then it has this little cap. And so what it does is you'll see the air go up, and then it'll burp and come down. But see, it can't get air in because it's sitting on there. So that's how, if you don't put one of these kind of lids, or one of these kind of lids that lets air out but not in, if you don't do that, and you just screw on a lid real tight, you can literally blow your lid off, okay? But at the same time, you don't want to say, well, then I just won't cover it, because you need to cover it to keep other bacteria from coming in.
That sounds like a science project.
Yeah. So these are really nice. I got them off of Amazon, which is where I get everything. But these are just 2 different brands, and it's just got where it sometimes even some of your liquid comes through, because when it starts fizzing up and stuff, some of the liquid comes out. So I always put my jars on my counter in a glass Pyrex. But you can mark on here, you can put the month and the date on these little counter things, in case you're like me and can't remember what day it is, to know when you're supposed to check it. Because depending upon what you're making, some of it can be done as quick as 3 days, and sometimes it might take up to 10 days. And again, it depends upon a lot of factors, how cold it is in the room, how warm it is in the room, that kind of thing. So these are exactly the same thing, they're just 2 different varieties. And then it's also real important to keep the food submerged when you're doing it. So these are just 2 examples of weights that you just put on the top. There's other ways you can do it. If you're like doing a crock and you got a big old crock and you're doing sauerkraut or pickles, you can just weigh it down with saucers. It's not, you don't have to have the fancy gadgets, but this is just real nice to have and keep it sunk, because if the food comes up above the water line, sometimes you'll get some, again, you might get some growth of stuff that you're not wanting to grow. Okay?
Well, I'm supposed to talk about freezing, okay, foods, and that's probably the most common method that most of us use. How many of you freeze vegetables or freeze? Most of us do a lot of that. And of course, you know, it's very important if you're going to have a good tasting product, okay, that you blanch. And I'm going to get on my soapbox here. You must blanch in order to kill the enzyme action. The enzymes are what store your flavor of your product. And so, anyway, you need to blanch your vegetables before you put them up. I have a wonderful book here called So Easy to Preserve. And anyway, it has a nice chart here that tells you exactly, you know, how long to blanch, okay, your vegetable. For example, if you were doing, let's see, eggplant, 4 minutes, okay, in boiling water for eggplant. Also, how many of you have tried blanching in the microwave? Have you ever used the microwave? Why not? Those little blanching pots really heat up your kitchen. And if you can find a good microwave bowl, of course you can also use glass, you can use cornware, you can blanch in your microwave. And it really doesn't heat your kitchen up. You don't have all the, to deal with all the boiling water back and forth. So anyway, that's the way I do all my veggies now. Yeah, I blanch in the microwave. So you might want to try it. See what kind of product you get. You can freeze all sorts of things, even pecans. Okay, we have a lot of pecan trees, and of course we freeze our pecans. Okay, and they will keep several years in the freezer because of the oil content, and they're just delicious. It's so nice to have them to pull out of the freezer and make pies with. Delicious. How many of you ever make sugar pecans or spicy sugar pecans? You know how good they are. But anyway, it's nice to be able to pull pecans out of the freezer to do that. And if you haven't bought pecans lately, they're expensive. Yeah. And anyway, just like with any fruit tree, pecans take a lot of management. There's a lot of spraying and everything that has to go along with getting a good fruit crop.
Cindy, how do you slow the process of once you open that bag for it to not go away real fast?
Okay, are you talking about for pecans?
Yeah, the pecan.
Okay,
I know there's things.
Right,
How do you slow that process?
you know what? It doesn't seem like the enzyme action, you know, works with pecans. I think it's because of the oil in the pecan. But anyway, they're just delicious. They don't lose their flavor.
I know that's what I'm getting at. How do you slow it down from them pecans?
Okay, I don't do anything but put them in a bag and put them in the freezer.
I put them in 1 cup because that's usually what you want in a recipe. I put them in baggies, and then I put 3 of them in the freezer, quart size. And when I bake something, I just put
They're
it.
ready to go. They've got just the right amount there. But anyway, they don't lose their flavor.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I've had them in the freezer, like you say, 2 or 3 years.
Whereas a fruit product like peaches, you know, because we don't blanch peaches, they're not going to last as long in the freezer. You know, say like peas or corn or something else that you have blanched. And so, you know, for optimum flavor, you're probably going to want to use those in 3 or 4 months. You know, and put them in the freezer. Anybody want to add anything about fruits?
I was gonna say, when I freeze, I take my zucchini, does everybody make chocolate zucchini cake? and
Oh,
stuff
yes,
now?
yes.
Okay, so I take my zucchini and I put it through my, remember when we got those,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
bottle of
salad
food there.
master or something.
Salad mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, cheese salad mask. Anyway, I put them through there, and then my recipe calls for a cup.
Right.
So I put a cup in the freezer, already shredded, so that I can just grab it and make my cupcakes or cakes or whatever I'm making that has to shred. Makes it quick and easy.
Yes, yes, and lemon juice, how many of you have ever frozen lemon juice? I have a friend that brings me a bushel of lemons, Meyer lemons from their tree, and I juice those, and I freeze that in little bags about, a third or fourth a cup, what I'm gonna need for my recipe. Okay, and that's really, really nice. Also, freezer jams and jellies. How many of you ever make freezer jams and jellies? Yeah. That's fun. It makes a softer product, okay, than a jelly that you cook down on the stove. But anyway, it's really delicious. I had some fresh strawberries, and I made some strawberry jam. Okay, and you use sugar gel. You actually take the sugar gel and 3/4 a cup of water, and you bring it to a boil. And in the meantime, you have your strawberries covered in sugar, waiting. And after you boil your sugar gel, you actually pour it over. Okay, your strawberries and sugar, stir it real good until your sugar dissolves, and then you can put it in containers like this and put it in the freezer. And it's really nice to
And how long, once you put it in the freezer, what's the age limit of that where you can freeze it?
I usually doesn't last long enough for me to answer that question.
So 3 days are good?
I would think 4 months, and after that, probably it might start to lose a little flavor. Like
I've
peaches
never heard
and
of
stuff, after about 4 months, they start to lose their flavor. But,
I have a question.
yeah.
Does anybody have a good recipe that uses stevia or xylitol or erythritol or maybe even monk fruit? Anything that's not, it's like Jeff can't have sugar anymore, so I've got ice cream recipes, I've got all kinds of recipes, but I don't have a good sugar-free one for jelly or jam. They're just not the same. I guess neither does anybody else.
I just don't know that you can make a good jelly without sugar. Now, there are some,
I
there's,
tasted my ice cream, it's good.
oh, it's delicious. There's one box of sugar gel that uses reduced sugar.
Reduced, but it's not.
But you still got to have the sugar in there to have a good product.
And he's not supposed to have Splenda, so you're sitting there, you've got to use stevia or something like that. And I've tried, and I've got a few recipes, but they're okay.
The ice cream is delicious though. It's really good. I make that too. Corn, how many of you put up corn in the freezer?
Not anymore.
Do you blanch it on the cob or do you wait and blanch it after you put it off?
I'll tell you, we haven't grown corn in a while. This is the way we did it.
Put it in the dishwasher.
No, we didn't do that. We just would cut the ends off and shuck it to almost all the way down.
Right.
And leave just a little
Right.
of the shuck on there and throw it in freezer bags and put it in the freezer, and it always tasted fresh, no matter how.
Get a
fresh.
fuss at you because
And
no,
black-eyed peas,
that's
we didn't
just-
wash them.
That's not going to keep very long.
It kept a long time.
It's not going to keep the flavor.
It's not gonna taste as good, but it's still
It
what
doesn't.
we did.
It's not going to taste the same.
No, what's the deal about the dishwasher?
Oh,
What
was it Terry? To blanch your sweet corn in the dishwasher? Oh, because of the heat cycle. I knew somebody once that.
I don't think so. It might have been.
I knew someone once that amazed me by telling me that story, that they actually blanched their corn in the dishwasher. And that heat would get so hot that it would blanch the corn.
And it washes the
There he is.
Oh, what I did with my corn, I don't have it anymore, but when I did do that, I blanched my whole corn, cob, and cooled it and just bagged it up.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any, no bag, it's all eaten up. Easy way, I didn't take off the cob.
My daughter in the valley, her husband
I
is a
did.
farmer.
Large fruit.
And anyway, when they do sweet corn, they'll have have, 500 to 1,000 years at a time. And it takes a village, they call in all the friends, and we got one group shucking, and one group silking, and they, have a whole army of people putting up that corn, and they cut it off and put some up on the cob too. But they do blanch it, and it's delicious. It's my last bag here for Mother's Day.
Does anybody else vacuum seal their vegetables?
Yes.
I don't blanch, I just vacuum seal, so you think that loses flavor?
It will, but probably not as bad as the Ziploc bag, because you are burping, you're taking all the air out, which, causes enzyme action. So, anyway, that's really all I have to say about freezing, and I feel like you probably could have taught me something.
Anyway, so what I'm going to talk about is dehydrating. Does anybody dehydrate now at all? Cool, very good. So what do you dehydrate? Tell me some of the things you dehydrate.
Well, we've done for jerky and.
Okay, good. So you can see, I don't do meat. So if there's any questions about meat, I'm going to let you answer those questions. And Peggy, what do you dehydrate? Okay, very good. Did somebody else?
Well, right now what I did is all my onions were getting ready to be harvested. So I was cutting the tops off the onions and just slicing them up and sticking them in my dehydrator. And now I've got a bunch of like chives.
So they're just good to snack on, especially if they're.
Are used at the top, the crispy onions that are so French onions.
Yeah.
I use dehydrated onions in place of those. But anyway, so maybe I will spark your interest in dehydrating. Now, everything we've talked about today, dehydrating is going to be your most expensive because you do need the tool, the Pacific dehydrator to do it. So these others are like cheap and you can just gather things from your kitchen. Dehydrating is going to be a little bit more on the expensive side to get everything that you need for it. So, okay, what I'm going to talk about today just quickly, I don't have much time, so basically I'm just going to spark your interest in this, and if you want to go into any more detail than what I say today, there's a wealth of information out there. You won't have any trouble finding books or finding anything on the internet, but I'm just going to kind of go over the very basics today. So we're just going to hit the basics of drying, the method of drying foods, the types of foods that are best for dehydrating. Not all foods are the best to dehydrate. And preparing the foods for dehydration, like fruits, vegetables, herbs, and storing it once you do get it dehydrated. So drying by definition is just a process of moving all the water from the food. Just like air, water is what helps the bacteria to grow. So once you remove all the water, then the bacteria cannot grow anymore. It also slows down the enzymes that spoils food, and it's the oldest form of food preservation. The advantages is it's economical. If you have a whole bushel of strawberries or something like that, I mean, you can put part of them, you can do jam with part of them, you can put up whole in the freezer, and you can make fruit leather, let's say, and that way you can do different things with it, and not just not just putting them all up in the freezer or making jam with all of them. So it's easy to do. It's time consuming, but it is very easy to do. Dried foods are tasty and lightweight. Dried foods are easy to store compared to canned or frozen foods. I normally store mine in canning jars, but you can store them in in Ziploc bags. That way they lay on top of each other. I just like how they look in the canning jars in my cabinet. Drying does change the nutritional value a little bit. It loses some of the vitamin A and C. Minerals are lost if the food is dehydrated and the water is not consumed. You know, like when you're boiling green beans or whatever, you know, a little bit of that, all that, the nutrients does come out in the water. The fiber content stays the same. Oh, this is the getter.
Yeah.
The calorie content stays the same, but it'll be much more concentrated, so you have to be very careful. So you see the 1 ounces of grapes there and the dried, and they're both 85 calories. So, oh no, the grapes are 20 and the 1 ounce of raisins is 85. So you see what, so you have to be very careful. If you're a diabetic or something like that, you know, the vegetables and the herbs may be more of what you would probably need to do. The methods of drying is outdoors, sun drying, solar and vine drying, indoors, food dehydrators, oven, room drying, and the microwave, herbs only. And so sun drying, that you see down here at the bottom, we're not going to spend any time on that. Our humidity here is too high. So to sun dry, in Texas, it is not recommended at all. It requires the right conditions, at least 85 degrees. Well, we have that, but what we don't have is that low humidity and that constant breeze. So I do not recommend sun drying here at all. Vine drying is good for beans. You leave the pods on the vine until the beans rattle, and then you can shell them once that the pods are dried and shriveled. If the beans are moist after picking, you can still dry them by using other methods. Beans must be, if you're vine drying, they must be treated to kill insects on the insects and their eggs, which is very easy there. Freeze for 48 hours or bake them in the oven. So anybody do the dried pintos on the vine? And yeah.
But sometimes they mold.
Yeah.
The humidity.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the only thing I vine dry is my pinto beans.
Black beans.
And tools for indoor, drying indoors, you need the food dehydrator. That's going to be your biggest expense, is your food dehydrator. Oven, you know, if you think you're going to be interested in drying foods, you need to invest in a food dehydrator. Some of the stuff that you dehydrate is going to take 10 to 12, 13 hours, and you're going to have your oven on. Of course, I know it kicks on and off, but you're going to have to maintain a constant temperature in your oven for that amount of time. In the end, I don't know how cost efficient just using your oven would be. A hot room for air drying, a hot dry room, which I would say herbs would be the main thing that you would want to dry in a hot dry room, and microwave oven for herbs only. So my herbs, I don't even put them in the dehydrator. I either air dry them, hang them up. I use things to decorate, you know. Anybody that knows me, I'm all about the ambiance of everything. So I like to tie my herbs up and hang them. Or another thing that when I'm drying my herbs I like to do is get a nice pretty pottery bowl and just put your herbs in there, take them off the stem and put them in there, and then every day or every other day come by and just fluff up your herbs on the countertop. That's how I dry most of my herbs. But you can dry them in the microwave. I don't like the microwave, so I try to avoid it at all costs. The food dehydrator. When you're buying a food dehydrator, well, they make them like metal. They need to be made out of metal or high-grade plastic. It has an enclosing heating element. a countertop, you want it, where are you gonna set it in order to dehydrate? The thermostat needs to be from 85 to 160 degrees. It needs a fan or a blower, metal trays made of sturdy, lightweight plastic. It needs a UL seal of approval, a dial for regulating temperature, which most of your dehydrators are gonna have all that right there. I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you're gonna invest in a dehydrator, to get a timer. Because invariably, you're gonna be running around, and then finally you're gonna get to chopping up your vegetables or cutting up your fruit. You're gonna get it in the dehydrator, and it's gonna be 14 hours, and that 14 hours is gonna be 3 o'clock in the morning. So, I wouldn't even get a dehydrator unless it had a timer on it. At first I was like, oh, I can do it. But then I got to thinking, yeah, think about the end time that you got to get up and turn that thing off. So a timer is necessity, not nice to have. If you the types of dehydrators, you have your vertical, and then you have your horizontal. I have the exact model that on the horizontal model right there is the one I have. And the vertical one, they're a whole lot cheaper. So I'll kind of backtrack now and say, maybe you want to dabble in it, but you don't really know that that's what you really want to do. The vertical ones are a whole lot cheaper than what the horizontal ones are. When I took a class on dehydrating, I knew the second that class was over with that that's what I was going to do. I went straight for the Excalibur. But if you're just kind of indecisive and you don't want to spend $300 on a dehydrator just yet, the vertical ones do well and they're good, but the ultimate is the Excalibur. And the reason being, on the vertical one, the airflow comes up from the bottom through the top. So if you wouldn't do this, but if you had onions, bell peppers, and strawberries in there, you know what's going to happen to your strawberries? Technically, on the horizontal one, the airflow pushes from the back through the front. So therefore, you could mix strawberries and onions together, and neither one of them is going to pick up the flavor of the other one.
Have you tried that?
No, I was going to say, no, I haven't tried it. Have you?
No.
And who wants to ruin your
I wouldn't, but I wouldn't want to waste your onions or your strawberries to see if that, but technically that you can dry different things in the horizontal one and it not pick up the other flavor. Oven drying, you need to set your oven at 140 degrees. For traditional ovens, open the oven door 2 to 6 inches so that the air can circulate. And you see where they have the fan put up by the oven door there. And so since the oven door is open, your temperature is going to vary. So there you go. You cannot put your dried fruit up unless you know for sure that it is dried. So there you go with that. Okay, it may even take longer than it would in a dehydrator with the oven door being open and doing it that way. Use an oven thermometer to monitor temperature and adjust as needed. Now, oven drying is very good for basil. Those of you who can't seem to, your basil always comes out black. Oven drying is very good to dry your basil, but you don't even have to turn the oven on. Just take your basil leaves, lay them on a paper towel, put them in the oven, turn your oven light on, and just let it sit until it dries, and it will dry just as green as when you picked it. I know Tom does something, I can't remember, so tell him what you do for your basil.
Well, you take your basil and you put it in a bag, a paper bag, poke some holes in it, tie a string on it, you tie it in the middle of the ceiling fan. And the air circulates through it, and in a couple of days you take it down and then you check it. And if it's fine, you have a little grater for Parmesan, and you just put the leaves in there and you grind them up.
That sounds like a decorating.
That's what I was going to say, Carol. I didn't know that you had paper bags hanging from your. I'm going to have to do that. MacGyver.
I wanted to ask you a question about the fan in the convection oven. Will it do some of what you need?
You know, I don't know anything about a convection oven, so I don't know. I'm sure you could probably look at. Yeah, yeah.
Look that up too.
Yeah, I bet it's somewhere out there because you wouldn't be the only one.
The idea is to make it more even than a conventional one.
Yes, yes.
So that everything cooks the same.
Same,
Also
right.
Carol, the
works
only-
to deliver the moisture to the outside instead of circulating moisture.
The only caveat I'd give on that is if you've got herbs and you've got a convection or an air fryer, it's just gonna blow those herbs all over the place.
That's true.
If it's regular.
I don't know that it will.
Well, my air fryer does, I know that for a fact.
Yeah, my air fryer.
Blows the garlic powder right out of my garlic bread.
Right.
I just don't have anything else that it has done that to.
Also another, back to basil, because people always ask about basil. If you ask me, the best way to put up basil is to make pesto and freeze it. And you've got bright green, spreadable basil at your fingertip. Generally what I do is when it's the oncome of a frost, that's when I go out there and pull my basil, every single plant up, and I put it in a bucket of water, set it in my kitchen till I can get back to it, because sometimes, you know, you're covering everything, you don't have time, I see you, Carol, just so good, and you don't have time to, get your basil done, that day. It grows fairly well in a bucket of water for a couple of days, and come back and de-leaf it and make your pesto and I put it up in the little plastic ball, little jars, and they sit in the freezer, and then when you get ready, you've got basil for anything that you want. Carol?
I have a friend that uses the old-fashioned ice trays. She puts her
Yes,
olive
yes.
oil, she puts the basil in the olive oil, and then she can pop them out and make her pesto. It puts it in the freezer.
Right.
So it's good all the
You do
time.
that with your garlic too. I do
Yes.
that with my garlic.
Yes.
Put it in an ice tray and then I dump it out, put it in a bag and just grab it.
An ice tray is 1 tablespoon if anybody, so that's what I do, like, of course, we're getting off subject, I realize, but homemade chicken broth, I have ice trays, that's all I use them for. They don't, water doesn't ever go in them. And I either I put that, any kind of juice, like juice in the lemons or whatever. If I got a little left over, I put tomato juice when I'm canning tomatoes. Just do them, and then you've got 1 tablespoon. So get you some ice trays that you don't use for ice, because they're very handy.
It's nice to have one with lids too.
Okay, trays for oven drying. You would basically, what this is saying, that you would anytime you dry, even in the dehydrator, you're going to, don't lay your fruit on top of it. You want it separated. So you want, because air's got to get everywhere. So you don't want anything laying on top of each other. You want good around it. You don't want to stack it. And the oven racks they're suggesting is cookie trays, the sheet pans with cookie drying racks that you would take your, well, you see it right there, I don't know what they're called. But the racks that when you take your cookies off and set them to cool, is what they're suggesting for on oven drying on trays that you'll use for that. Room air drying, you just need that, a well ventilated room, an attic, room, car, camper. It's good for herbs, hot peppers, and nuts. Really, basically, just don't put it in the sun. So if you have somewhere to hang it and it's not in the direct sun, that's a good place to air dry herbs and peppers. Nuts, it's saying spread it out on paper on a single layer. Dry with the microwave. They even have books out that you can dry things with in a microwave that would give you the time, how to prepare it, and all of that. But you would want to do it in small batches. Check your microwave instructions, and remember, it can cook food instead of drying. So you do need to remember that. Okay, drying fruits. So some fruits are better than others. Dried fruit usually tastes sweeter because it's removed the water, so it makes it more concentrated. A dry fruit concentrates the sugar and the calories. People with diabetes needs to be careful on their diet when eating dried fruit. I don't dry a whole lot of fruit. Mostly what I do when I do it is I make fruit leather, is what I do. To me, it's just easier, and I think it tastes better. So in order to make fruit leather, generally, this recipe, well, I only didn't have enough. This isn't my best quality fruit leather. I only had 1.5 cups of fruit. The recipe called for 6, and I tried to downsize it to 1.5. This is strawberries that I did the other day. And when you make fruit leather, and there's tons of recipes out there, especially on Pinterest, for fruit leather. But when you make fruit leather, you're going to need to add juice with it. So it's not just, so say, I think the recipe called for 6.5 cups of crushed fruit. So you're going to wash your fruit, take the stems off and all of that, put it through the blender and blend it up till you have puree. And then you're going to mix a little bit, you're going to mix some, they say white grape juice. I use apple juice, mix a little bit of apple juice with that. And now I'm trying it a new way, and it didn't really come out like I want, but I think it's because I tried to alter the recipe. But I saw a deal on YouTube where your fruit leather will look and feel more like bought fruit leather if you use pectin in it. So what you would do, and what I did here was, I got my 3.5, well, it was 1.5 cups, but let's say you have your 6 cups of pureed fruit. You would put that on the stove, and you would get it to a simmer. And there's no roaring boil or anything like that with jelly in this. You're just activating the pectin. But so you would get your fruit simmering. You would take your juice and call for 6 cups of crushed fruit, 3 cups of juice. And this is a natural pectin, and it comes with a calcium water thing, and then the pectin. So the calcium water, you would add a tablespoon of that to your juice. And then you would, once your fruit is simmering, you pour the juice and stir it up real good. You can tell you really need to stir it good. And then you pour the fruit juice into the simmering fruit that's simmering, and you get it back up to a little bit of a simmer, not a boil, just a simmer. And then you add a tablespoon of the pectin and cook it 1 minute, and then you pour it onto your tray. And I wish it would have came out better, but this is the silicone tray in making fruit leather that you would use in my dehydrator. So you can see it has a little lip there, so you can fill this up fairly full. Mine, I didn't have enough, and it's so flat. That's why it's so flat. But the fruit leathers are endless of how you can, the combinations, what fruit you use, and all of that. Now, these are quite an investment too, but they're well worth the money. if you don't have these, and you can use parchment paper, and you would, on your trays, you would lay the parchment paper on your tray and then pour your fruit mixture on that to make your fruit leather. So, like I said, drying fruit, I don't know, I just like the fruit leather better, but you can dry, this, once again, if you don't have this book and you do any kind of, this is the holy grail of, and it's got a complete section in here on dehydrating. And with the same thing like the freezing, and that has the chart that tells you how long, how much, and all of that. So at least you have a guideline to go by. Preparing fruit for drying, this is just, make sure your fruit is suitable, clean the food preparation area, wash your hands with, y'all know that canning. Supposed to have a clean, be sure your sink's clean and all of that when you can. Wash your fruit, decide how you want the fruit will be dried, thin slices. Of course, if you do a whole half of a fruit, like cut a fig in half, it's going to take a whole lot longer to dehydrate than it will slices. The peel can be left, but this increases the drying time. You know your fruit is done when it is pliable, and it doesn't stick together. So that's how when your fruit is ready. Although if you look on that chart, it'll give you give you an idea of how long you need to do it, but it needs to be pliable. Pre-treating fruit. Fruit does need a pre-treatment. So I know that's another step, but it's not that bad. It just prevents the fruit from darkening, and there's a number of ways to do that pre-treatment. And down at the very bottom, you've got honey, syrup blanching there. Those are going to add calories, so remember that. I'm going to skip the sulfate dip because there's no sense in going into that. Ascorbic acid is the way to go. It's the easiest and the fastest. It's safe and easy to use. It doesn't last as long as the sulfur, but it's not that big of a deal. So you can get, all it is vitamin C. You can get it in powder form or tablet. Be sure that if you get the tablets, it's the 3,000 milligrams. You've got to be sure that it's that. You'll just mix, if you have the powder, you mix 1 teaspoon with 2 cups of water. If you have the tablet, you're going to crush up, is it 1 tablet, I guess? Yeah, with 2 cups of water. And then you're going to soak your fruit for 3 to 5 minutes, and you can use that twice before you have to change it. And that's what I do. I do the vitamin C. You can use fruit juice. It's not as effective as ascorbic acid. It is easy to use. And then there's your, it needs to be 100% juice. And then you can use orange, cranberry, grape, pineapple, lemon. Like I said, to make this fruit leather, I used apple because that's what I had. And so you place the fruit in the bowl, cover the fruit, soak 3 to 5 minutes, and that juice can be used twice also.
How many calories is that at?
I don't know, but I bet it's not as much as the honey and the honey dip. You would mix half a cup of sugar with 1.5 cups of boiling water. And then cool it to lukewarm, and then you add your honey. So on the honey, it's sugar and honey. Then you place the fruit in the dip, soak 3 to 5 minutes, drain it, and then put it on the trays. And that can be used more than once. Honey dips add more calories to the fruit. Syrup blanching is more or less candying the fruit. You can mix together in a saucepan 1 cup of sugar, light corn syrup, 2 cups of water, add a pound of the prepared fruit for 10 minutes, and remove from the heat. Let stand 30 minutes, and then you place it on the dryer trays. And like I said, it kind of candies the fruit. Then you're going to place your fruit on the trays. You see how the fruit is separated. None of it's touching or anything. Keep the fruit from touching and overlapping. Dry for the recommended amount of time. When you test for doneness, it has to be absent of moisture, pliable, but not sticky or tacky. You can also, so let it dry, well, we'll get back to the conditioning. And the other good thing to me about drying fruit or vegetables, if it cuts off at 3 o'clock in the morning, your timer, you get up at 7 and you go in there and it's not done, it's no big deal. Just turn the thing to a couple more hours. It's not ruined or anything. You just continue to dry it until it gets to where it needs to be. So to me, I like that really you can't ruin it as long as you dry it to the doneness that it's supposed to be. You do have to condition your fruit and your I do the vegetable too. After drying it, you need to let it cool, which that again is no big deal. All you do is let it cool for half an hour, and you put it in a plastic bag. Don't put it up or anything. Just let it sit out for a little while. And if there's no condensation on what says, how long does it say to wait? If pack dry, seal the, and let stand for 7 to 10 days. Shake it at, several times during that period. If you don't see any condensation on it in there within 7 to 10 days, then you can do, put it wherever you're going to permanently store it. If you do, you just need to put it back in the dehydrator for just a little while longer. Be sure you let it cool, before you try to even put it in a plastic bag or a jar, because that may create condensation just in itself while it's cooling. And then storing it, the fruit should be completely cool. You can put it in candy jars, that's what I do. Plastic freezer containers with lids, plastic freezer bags, no storage bags. Vacuum seal it and store in a cool, dry, dark place for up to 1 year. So remember, warm temperatures reduce the storage time just a little bit. So you do want to check for signs of moisture or spoilage. That will be obvious. You won't have any problem knowing if it's spoiled or it'll grow mold if it. The best way to use your fruit is to eat it as a snack. You can rehydrate it, which is kind of cool. I mostly do that with mushrooms. But just remember, over soaking reduces the flavor and the quality of it. And fruit can ferment if it's resoaking too long, and refrigerate while resoaking if time is longer than 2 hours. I'll do like mushrooms, and I'll get whatever started. The spaghetti sauce or whatever, the first thing I do is rehydrate my mushrooms. By the time I'm ready to put them in the sauce, they're rehydrated. So it doesn't take long to...
You can just use that liquid in the sauce.
And I do. Don't pour that liquid out. You have to pour it in an ice tray and freeze it. And vegetables, that's mostly what I do is vegetables. How am I on? See, I can't do anything. I'm mostly, like I said, with fruits I usually do the leather. Vegetables is mostly what I do, and dehydrate and choose vegetables suited for drying, the best quality right after picking, of course, and wash in cool running water. Trim and peel accordingly to directions. Remove any decayed or bruised sections. Make sure the pieces are uniform, and that's for the drying effect. You don't want a piece this big and then a piece this big. Try to kind of keep them uniform so that they dry uniformly. Storing, wash, and cut vegetables in the refrigerator before drying will reduce quality and nutrient value. And then pre-treating vegetables, you steam blanch, and as Cindy was saying, it destroys the enzymes, which will reduce the quality, helps to set the color, reduces drying time, but the most things that I dehydrate are onions, green peppers, garlic, I haven't done corn, and mushrooms. You don't have to blanch them, and those are the main things that I dehydrate, are those. And then after the blanching, you dip it in cold water to stop it, and then cool until slightly hot to touch. Place it on the drying tray. There they have mushrooms placed on that drying tray, and then wipe off the excess water under the drying trays. As you see, unless you have the parchment paper, the trays that are open weave, plastic open weave that sits in the trays. That way the air can get over, under, around, and all of that. So the recommended time for drying vegetables, you read it on, always read somewhere your recommended time. Don't try to guess, because you'll come out with, one time I overdid strawberries, and they were literally a powder when I went in there to check them. So always kind of read your directions. Vegetables dry faster towards the end. That's another thing. You'll sit there and I'll kind of check on them. It's like, they're not doing nothing. They're not doing nothing. Kind of like baking a potato. And then all of a sudden, wham, they're done. So they do dry faster towards the end. Strong smelling vegetables equals strong smelling odors, meaning garlic. I dried, and I'll pass around some of these in just a minute, but I dried garlic the other day, and a friend of mine, I just would buy bulbs of garlic and just save them. Well, a friend of mine told me the other day, did you know Sam's has a big old bag of already peeled garlic? I did not know. So I had my daughter pick me up one, and I just ran it through the food processor and chopped it up, because I would buy these bags of garlic and sit there and slice, and so I ran it through the food processor, made big chunks, and I did dry it on the mat, on the silicone mat, and dried it, but I did it at the other house, at our other house. Y'all, I still am dealing with the garlic smell. It was strong, because that big old bag made the whole, I've never done a whole dehydrator full, it'd just be a tray or two. It was strong and still is strong. But anyway, if you're going to do like onions and jalapenos, watch those too. If you have some place other than your direct kitchen to do them in, where you can, because it will smell. Doesn't smell bad, but it does smell strong sometimes. Drying strong and mild smelling vegetables, strong smelling vegetables. So, but I'm going to tell you what, if you just get a dehydrator to do garlic powder, you will never ever buy garlic powder at the store again, ever. I mean, onion powder, celery, salt, all that, you will never, it's unbelievable the quality of doing it at home. And then dry vegetables until they are crisp, they will have about 10% moisture. So, because they are so dry, no conditioning is needed. So, storing them, once again, home candy jars, same thing, plastic freezer bags, or vacuum seal, store in a cool, dry place for up to 6 months. Always checking signs of moisture and spoilage. That will, like I said again, that will be very obvious if that happens. And using dried vegetables, you can crush and use as powder, which is my favorite thing to do. You can use them for chips. You can soak them in vegetable juice or bouillon. I have never seen anything take one that I do. The peppers, the onions, or the mushrooms don't take 1 or 2 hours. So if it's just 1 or 2 hours, soak in you can soak out on your cabinet. If not, you probably need to put it in the refrigerator. Also, if you add boiling water, I add hot water to mine. I do add hot. And then add directly to your food with the extra liquid. So while y'all are looking at that, I kind of already went over drying herbs. It's an easy way to preserve your herbs. A dehydrator or room temperature works best. Like I said, you're going to get that big old dehydrator. I don't know. I just do my herbs air dry rather than through the dehydrator. You can only do it in small batches. And, oh, that's microwave. You know, and I'm sure you already know that if you're going to when you go to dry your herbs, pick them early in the morning. That's when they have their best flavor. As it gets hot, herbs will lose their flavor during the day. Pick carefully so that the leaves aren't bruised. Prepare the dehydrator right away. Rinse them in cool water, shake to remove the excess water, and toss any herbs that are bruised or spoiled. Drying herbs in a dehydrator. You would preheat. Mine doesn't have a preheat. I don't preheat. But between 95 and 115, 125 degrees when the humidity is high. So a lot of things will be between 125 and 175 that you dehydrate. Place them on the trays on a single layer, and now your herbs are done when they crumble. You do want them to crumble. You don't want your vegetables or your fruit to crumble. So it takes about 1 to 4 hours. And then there's your dip. There's a whole bowl full of looks like basil, and then you have it on the tray, and then look, you don't get very much in the end. Air drying, you asked me, that's my preferred method. See how pretty that is? See, that will just make a good kitchen decoration while you're drying them. And so tie in small bunches, hang to dry, high moisture and mold on basil and mint if you don't get it dried quickly. Hangs in small, just like Tom just said, hang in small batches in a paper bag with holes to dry. The bag catches the leaves or the seeds, and it also allows the air to circulate. Oven drying, we went over that with basil and there again, it just tells you how to do it. But see, you're just going to leave the oven light on. You're not going to turn the oven on. You're just going to leave the oven light on. Pilot light if gas, but I don't think gas stoves have pilot light. They're all electric starters. So I don't know how old this. I stole this PowerPoint. And so that may need to be taken off because I don't think gas stoves have pilot lights anymore.
Actually, the heat from the pilot light would probably be enough.
And you're probably right. My herbs are dry. Now what? The leaves, there again, should be crispy. They should crumble between your fingers. Store in air. There again, I store mine in canning jars. And then store in a cool, dry, dark area to maintain the color and the fragrance. And remember, dried herbs are 4 times stronger than fresh. So your substitute is use 1/4 to 1/3 of the amount listed in the recipe to substitute dried herbs for fresh. So Example, spaghetti sauce uses 1 tablespoon of fresh oregano, use up to 1 teaspoon of dried. And all of y'all probably already knew that. Drying fruits and vegetables and herbs can be fun and easy. Follow the recommended guidelines for the best results. After drying, be sure you store properly and check periodically for spoilage. Use within the recommended time. And then there's some acknowledgement. They acknowledge the So Easy to Preserve book. And if I'm not mistaken, this is Cindy's. And this is an excellent book too. And I think she has a section on dehydrating in this book, if I'm not mistaken. All right. Do y'all have any questions? Everybody's going to buy the hydrator.